All right, guys, welcome back. I'm your host, Tom Caffarella. We've got another great guest today, Jer'Leigh out of Dallas, Fort Worth, Texas. Jer'Leigh, how's it going today?
Pretty good, pretty good. How's it going with you?
Good. Yeah, I'm excited to talk to you. I got, a bunch of stuff about your background, but I know your background a little bit from doing some research, but let's kind of like start off from the beginning, about like when you got into real estate, what it was like, and then, we'll progress towards where you're kind of at today. When did you
Okay.
get started in real estate?
So I came from the restaurant hospitality industry
Yep.
and was looking for a change in careers. So I got into real estate, and about a year and a half after getting into it, everything tanked. So year and a
What
half,
what
2 years.
what year was this? Just so I can get
That was, I got in around 2005, end of 2005, beginning of 2006.
Yeah. So
So
we started, me and you basically. I got my license in 2005. So
yeah.
we're starting at the same time. So the day you got your license, like me, everything was like bananas crazy.
Yeah, gangbusters. You
Yeah.
can walk outside, you'll make money, right?
Yep.
And then all of a sudden, when it tanked, it had been so long, as you know, since people had seen that type of thing. Well, we had never seen that bubble before, but then everybody's trying to deal with it and cope with it and coming up with new ways. And most, I would say at least half of the industry cleared out, right?
Yep.
All the agents went back to their went back to a different job, something that was on salary. And I think the ones that stuck around really had to get creative, and where I started getting creative is going to networking events that all had to do with real estate investing. I thought it was more interesting anyway, but those were the only people that were buying, so that's kind of what jump started my career into the real estate investing side of things. So I had my license, and then all of a sudden I'm picking up a lot of investor clients.
Yep. So had you kind of already gotten off to like a successful real estate career at that point? Or were you just like at the beginning, you're like, oh man, this is like the only thing I can do at this point to be successful?
I was just at the beginning. I didn't join a team. I didn't have a mentor. So I was I'd say I was kind of flailing a bit, but I was determined that I got my license. I was starting something new, and I wasn't getting out. I'm a little stubborn. So I stuck with it and just did my best to network my way through it.
Now, so at that point, did you understand that, I guess, going more after the investing side was going to be the smart business decision? Or was it more that, you kind of like found that out after you started getting success with it?
I think it was more of, it kind of happened at the same time. I knew that that was something that I wanted to do eventually. I didn't think it would happen that early in my career. But I thought it was a lot more difficult. I was going to really have to do so much, to get there. And, there's that first step's always the hardest if you're getting into real estate investing. I think more than anything, what ended up happening is with the market the way it was, and having so many investors out there that were the only ones buying, that was my only client. And so I was showing them and learning and reading and, everything I could at the same time to try to get up to speed so I could do what they were doing.
Yeah. Yeah. And I feel fortunate that I got into the market around the same time that you did and had, somewhat of a similar experience. And, for me, more than anything else, it was like, we really kind of got the wind at our back because, prices were as low as they were going to ever be.
Yeah.
Inventories as high as it ever was. And
Yeah.
it was like, for me, I thought it was a good time to kind of get into the market. So how were you at that point, like obtaining those clients? And how were you like, you didn't know a lot about real estate investing at that point. And I'm sure, you must have been somewhat intimidated like most of us are with investing in the beginning. So how did you find those people? And then how did you like get yourself up to speed as fast as you could?
So finding those people was basically, it was a little bit harder than it is today. Today you've got Facebook, you've got all kinds of Facebook groups, you've got all kinds of, you just get on YouTube and you can find a networking group or you can learn something. Back then it was a lot of reading, a lot of networking events, trying to find, people that were having those, and that was mainly word of mouth. We hadn't just infiltrated a bunch of social media at that point. So it was mainly networking events where I was picking up clients and sitting through all the seminars on different strategies, and then learning with my clients as they're going out and we're searching properties and they're analyzing properties, and I'm helping them as much as I can analyze those properties. And then with that, as the market started to turn, and I got more and more confident in that field, then I was like, well, then it's time for me to jump out there and start getting some of these properties as well.
So at that time period, when you were kind of in the beginning and you were working with these clients, were most of them planning to buy and hold the properties or flip them, or was it a combination of the two?
I think most of them were planning to buy and hold at the time because the seller's market wasn't, it was hard to sell something. So they were looking for rentals because people were needing rentals. There were so many foreclosures, people needed a place to stay, and you weren't as strict on your rental criteria when you were moving somebody in, because practically everybody was getting foreclosed on, that was rent material.
Yep. So how long were you working with people before you ended up saying, hey, I either know enough or I'm mentally ready to start doing some of this myself?
Well, I would say I am very cautious. So I took my time, my husband and I were raising our kids. They were very young. Every penny counted, and I was so afraid of making a mistake that took away from our household income that it took me a while. It probably took me a good 7-8 years before I finally made a jump with somebody. And even then it was just in slow increments. I'd say in the last 3 years, I've turned up the volume a ton. Which is, in hindsight, I wish I hadn't been so cautious. But I think that's kind of what all of us get into to a certain degree.
Well, I'm going to tell you, you're the perfect guest, and I'm going to tell you why. Because the majority of people who are listening to this are going through the same thing that you just described, which is you feel like you could do it, but there's something holding you back.
Yep.
And it took a lot, to make the leap. It took me, let me see. So from 2005 to 2010, it took me 5 years.
Yep.
It took you 7 to 8, whatever it is.
Yep.
Obviously, it's not a race to kind of do your first deal, but it took both of us a while. And there's people that are listening right now that are in that position that still haven't taken the leap. Yeah. So what was it for you to say okay, this is it. I either know enough or I'm ready, or what got you to do it?
I think more than anything, since that first deal was doing it with somebody, it was kind of a JV deal. So for the people that aren't familiar, JV just basically means you're partnering with somebody. And so I didn't have to put as much money in the deal, because I think that's the scariest part. I don't know about for you, but for me, just taking that money away from my household, and what if something goes wrong? What if, and then you've got your family on one side, or your friends that don't know anything, that are saying, I don't know if you should do that. People who are giving you advice and criticizing or trying to hold you back from making a mistake that they know nothing about that industry. Yeah. It's hard to break through those barriers.
So one thing that I always tell people now is the money will come when you find a good deal.
Yep.
So what was your value add to that JV? Because obviously if you're putting in just a little bit of money or no money, then someone has to feel okay, I'm going to work with Jer'Leigh and I'm going to get this. I'm putting up my money, but I'm going to get this in return. What was the this?
This was, they believed in my experience. We had worked together long enough. They'd seen me oversee things. And then also I come from a family that has a roofing and construction company. So I do have some sense of that. I did have a lot of knowledge on what I thought finish out would need to look like and what the cost would be. And I volunteered the time to oversee it. Mm-hmm. So yes. Whereas they didn't have the time and had the money, I had more time.
And that's when you're thinking about your value as an agent, I think there's so many different things that you could bring to the table. Not everyone can bring the construction, but you have the expertise, right? Yep. That a lot of people don't have. And, there's three parts of every deal. There's the money, there's the property, right? There's the land, labor, and capital, right? So if you don't have the capital, then you've got to have the, one of the other two, right? You've either got to have the labor or you've got to have the land. So in this case, you had the labor and I guess you found the deal together, right?
Exactly.
Or did you find the deal?
Well, I found the deal, brought it to him, and it was like, okay, I think this is the deal that I'd like to partner with,
Yeah. So you
and
really, you brought 2/3 of that then. So
Yeah.
you brought the deal, you brought the labor, and then they put the money in.
Exactly.
So did you go into that? Was that going to be a hold or was that going to be a flip?
That was a flip.
Okay. And so
At that point, we started to see more people being quite, the money loosened up a little bit, by the time I'm in year 7 and 8, then, the money's getting loaned out a little bit easier. Flips are getting more frequent. There's still tons of deals and tons of foreclosures out there to buy, but you're not as scared about, are we going to be able to sell it?
Yeah, that was right. So if we're talking 2012, 2013, that was like right when the market started to kind of change. And I remember like putting some of my flips on the market in 2013 and being like, wow, like there's so many buyers out there right now. This is shocking.
We can do this.
Yeah. It was a whole different thing because we went through so many years of like, oh, I hope that 5 people kind of show up at the open house. And then all of a sudden, I think it was the spring of 2013, where it was all of a sudden 40 or 50 people at most of the open houses. And like you said, the money started to loosen up too. It was easier to get money for deals and stuff like that. So the first flip that you had that you did a JV with, was it a successful one?
It was a successful one. We made good money. Now, because I didn't bring any money and I didn't have any experience with a JV opportunity, that was my first opportunity at that, and kind of trusting myself to oversee the job. Once it was said and done and we made money on it, the original agreement was that I would take 35% of the profit and they would take the rest. After that deal, I've only had a couple of more JVs, and that's been with family. And if I JV with somebody and I have to oversee it at all, then it's definitely a 50-50, if not more on my side, because I make more money, mainly 50-50 because I'm dealing with family members, right? Somebody else, it would be a higher rate just because I can go out and get hard money for a lot less than having to split that.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
Oh, it 100% makes sense.
Yeah.
I mean, so as you go along, I mean, like, so we used to partner with people in the beginning. We won't even do it anymore because it's like, we look at our dollar per hour, it's not worth it.
Exactly.
But except on, exception basis. But yeah, I mean, doing your first deal, that's the big thing. And, it's funny because when someone does their first deal, the second deal comes a lot faster. And what you just said, which is like, I think so important, that first deal, whatever your split was, you could have got 5%. But that first deal made you want to do your second deal, and your second deal
and gave you the confidence to do it.
Yeah, you felt like you could do it. So after you did that first one and you were feeling good about it, like, did your mind shift to say like you wanted to do more investing, or was it just kind of like, I'm going to be an agent, and if I come across stuff, I'm going to do some investing too?
No, it was definitely more investing. And I just, I stayed in the investment world here in the DFW area. It's a pretty close-knit group that's here. I mean, it's a large group, large community of investors, but we do a lot of networking, a lot of sharing of educational material. And through that, I've been able to do quite a few deals as far as flips, buy and holds, and that sort of thing. But then also growing my brokerage, like I know you have as well, telling agents, hey, look, you need to invest in yourself. Don't just go out there and keep chasing that next commission. Build your net worth out there every day. You come across deals every day. So it was kind of dual purpose in that I was chasing my own deals, but I was also trying to grow our team so that they would start getting educated in that realm as well.
So how many people were on your team then? And like, I mean, what's this kind of like the size of, or makeup of your team?
Well, my team at the time was just like 5 agents, right? So
Yeah.
it was me, my assistant, 5 agents. Now I've got 50 agents.
Oh boy.
And we're like trying to grow things, trying to do the deals within the community.
Yeah.
I haven't gotten to the point. I think it was I feel like after watching your story, you did, mine came a little more organically in the sense that I wasn't really planning on being a broker. I mean, I wanted to get my broker's license, but I didn't want to have a large team that I had to oversee and educate. But once you got a couple, anybody out there that has kids, if you're having a sleepover and you have one person over, it's the same thing if you have 5 or 10. You're just ordering more pizza,
And that's
so
so we crossed, I think we're at like 330 agents, something like that. And that's the thing. And it's like, so I always have this discussion with different people and there's no right answer to it. But like, for me, it's like the more agents you have underneath you, the better service and products that you can give.
yeah.
So to me, it's like sometimes people will say to me, well, what if you just had 100 of the best agents? And I'm like, kind of hard to actually do that. How do you do that? And so, but that's crazy though. Like 50 is a lot to manage. So are you a team leader or the broker now?
I'm the broker. Yeah.
Yeah. And so are you recruiting and leading with, hey, you guys should invest and work with investors, or is it, like more traditional?
No, it's mostly you should invest and work with investors. I would say about 80% of my agents are investor agents. And then I've got that 20% that still haven't done their first deal.
Yeah. And is that because they don't want to, or just because they haven't taken the leap yet?
It's more they haven't taken the leap yet. They're still trying to get coached through it, get guided through it, educate themselves enough. And I feel like in this, when you're talking about somebody who has a budget, home budget, you've got a family and everything like that, which is most of us, you get so conservative with your cash and you're afraid of taking out debt. You're afraid of all of these things that we in the investment world really preach, like use the debt, use somebody else's money, whereas it took me a little while to kind of get my mind around that. So just kind of coaching them through that to make that first deal, because it's that first step that's so hard. And they're afraid of messing up. You hear about the horror stories all the time. I mean, you hear the success stories, but for whatever reason, human nature, horror stories stick in your brain. Like,
yeah, and it's tough because it's like, it's hard to be perfect. And we do quite a bit, we'll cross like 100 to 150 flips every year.
Mhm.
And we always have some every year that we lose money on.
Yeah.
And I definitely don't focus on talking about those stories.
Yeah.
But they happen. You make mistakes and there's no way to kind of completely avoid it. But the thing I think is funny about this stuff is like, people will go to Vegas knowing their odds are bad and they don't care.
No,
right?
It's fun, right?
Yeah, like they don't care. But they won't do a real estate investment deal where they know they've got 95.5 odds, 95% odds it's going to work out right. And I think the other thing, like my market's a little different than yours. Like your market's a market where you go to flip a house, it doesn't work out. You can probably still rent it and do okay.
Yep.
So like I look at your market and every market's different, but like it's more of like a fail safe because, hey, what's the risk with owning, a single family in Dallas for the next like 20 or 30 years? I mean,
Not very
population is
risky.
growing. You guys have every demographic shift going in your direction. So, I mean, I look at that as like even way less risk than us because we don't have that. We've got the demographic shifts going away from us. But so, you had said that, you started doing them on your own. And then, so kind of fast forward us to today, like, what are you doing on the investing side yourself today? Are you still flipping? Are you holding? Like, what are your goals and what are you trying to accomplish?
My goals are mostly buy and hold right now.
Okay.
Occasionally doing a hotel or a flip. But for the most part, just holding on to the properties, doing the BRRRR method and making sure that, you get as much out of it turn around, buy another one, keep them rented. I have a lot of agents who do owner financing in Texas. And so that's a really big market here. I haven't broken into that yet. It's one of those shiny objects. I just try not to get too distracted in too many different areas. But right now it's buy and hold.
Okay, awesome. And so do you have any particular goals with that? Like, are you trying to get to a unit count or a passive income count or anything like that?
I think more than anything, right now it's all single family, and then I'm supposed to close on my first commercial building. So I'm super excited about that. You know, there's always firsts, no matter where you are in this game. And so I'll get my first commercial building. And once that's done, I'm hoping to break into multifamily or more commercial, and go that direction, something that's a little less hands-on than the single family rental market.
So what we found with all that stuff, it's just to go back to your sleepover analogy.
Yeah.
The more units, the better, because when you have a bunch of units all spread out, the management part becomes difficult.
Is an issue.
And so it's doable, but it's like, trading those greenhouses for the red hotels, and the red hotels are just much better. Harder to get into, more money, all that stuff, but more, foundationally stable. So congratulations on the commercial. Is the commercial deal, is it business tenants, or is it that it's a commercial, meaning like a lot of residential units?
Business tenants. So I'll office out of it. It just had like so much added value to it. Right now, the business that's in there takes up the whole building. I'll be able to chop it up into a couple of pieces, and rent out those other pieces and occupy part of it so they can pay, my rent. But then there's land there that we can add more office space to.
So
we'll build out on the other parcel of land.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So for the most part, like everything that you've done in real estate has some tie into the investing side.
Yes.
Whether like how you built your brokerage, how you're building your own portfolio, how you got clients, and really everything. So what would you say to kind of like the traditional agent who hasn't had any investment tie-in whatsoever and is working with regular traditional buyers, regular traditional sellers? Like, how has adding the investing component impacted you?
I mean, that alone, it's literally when you're just an agent and you're just chasing those commissions, and there's nothing wrong with that. There's people that make a fantastic career of doing that.
I've seen some numbers this year that are
phenomenal. And depending on your industry, whatever, but you can't retire on that. It always requires you to be present. You always have to be chasing that next deal, that next client, so that you can get that commission. You always have to be chasing it. Whereas if you start investing in real estate, that is the goal, is to take yourself out of that picture so that it is producing income and you don't have to actually be right there. You can get to a point where, like you said, is it a number of units? Is it a number of units? Do you want to have, can you retire and go live on a beach somewhere with 10 units? Yeah, you can. Depending on what your budget is, you can totally do that. Can you do that with 10 clients? Absolutely not.
Yeah. And I think that the thing that's like, we have a real estate school here too. And we take in people that are just thinking about getting their license, and they come in for their pre-licensing courses. And we always ask them like, hey, what got you interested in real estate? And everybody always says the same thing. They say freedom. Like, I don't want to have a boss. I want to have, free time.
Yeah.
And then obviously we know what the reality is once they get in. And we tell them this, but the reality is once you get in, you're kind of a slave to your clients. And if any listeners have ever read, Cash Flow Quadrant by Robert Kiyosaki, when you're self-employed, you own your job, right? You have a job, but you own the job, but you're still, working for somebody, and a lot of times with less flexibility. So a lot of times we see people start making money, and then they never get to that point or never start like building. And when you're not building, you're constantly working, and you can have those big numbers, but again, taking it back to like when they come through the door for their pre-licensing and we ask them the question, why? The why is never to make a bunch of money and to work 90 hours a week. We never hear
Yeah.
that, but
Who
that's a
wants to
lot of
work
times,
90 hours a week? I mean, we
but
do it, but
but without the planning, sometimes that's the direction it ends up going.
absolutely.
And I've been, as I'm sitting here, up on my mountaintop preaching, I have done that, right? Like, and
Yep.
probably some of my biggest mistakes are not holding on. Like I talked about a lot of the flips we've done and we still do. I should have held on to more of those. And that's why like your plan of not flipping them and keeping them, like, I think that's the best way to do it because you'll never regret holding them. You'll
No.
regret selling them, but you'll never regret keeping them.
Yeah.
So you have an awesome story. I mean, you have, a pretty similar story to us and, you're in a similar direction. Any other pieces of advice that you would give to real estate agents that are kind of listening to this?
Well, one, it's never too late. Like if there's a lot of people who are like, oh, the market's so inflated right now, there aren't any deals to be had. That's not correct either. There's deals to be had all over the place.
Yeah.
But you've got to get connected. I think that's one of the things I'll get comfortable every once in a while. And especially once COVID hit and I stayed home more, because I'm not much of a homebody. I get out there, I network and I'm pretty social. But it did make me stay home more. Obviously all of us more, but it got me out of the habit of networking. So I'm not going out as much. I'm not meeting as many people. And now that we're back to networking in person and going out more and seeing people more. And I've had to force myself to get back in that habit. And I was talking to my husband about it the other day. I'm like, why do I have to force myself? It's always beneficial. Every single time I go out and end up networking, I come back with either a deal or a connection that's going to turn into something that if I didn't leave my house, it would not have happened,
So how do you determine like, networking is really like a big, word, that, it can mean a lot of different things. Like, how are you figuring out like where to spend your time?
Well, again, I think personally, it's so much easier now. You can go on Meetup, you can go on any of these Facebook groups. You can start seeing what they're doing online first and see if that aligns with you. There's a lot of networking groups out there that I'll never make it to, just because I don't think that their message or whatever it is that they're doing doesn't quite align with what I do or what I want to continue to do. But if you're interested in it and you like the message that's being put out there, find out when that next networking function is, or message them and find out, hey, where do you network? Where do you go to meet people and find deals in this area? Because the last thing you want to do is, all of our time's valuable. And most of the time that you're networking, it's nights and weekends. So it's taken away from your family or something that you might rather be doing. So that little bit of due diligence through social media, of just putting your feelers out there, doing a little research, and maybe messaging a few people that you have seen doing what you'd like to do, find out where they're going and try to shadow that.
Yeah, I love that. Cool. Well, I want to thank you for joining. You have a really inspirational story. Definitely a lot of nuggets that you passed along. And I know
thank you.
Our listeners got a lot of value. So what's the best way if anybody wants to learn more about you or reach out to you that people can learn more?
Well, they can reach out to me on Facebook. Texcel Real Estate is the name of one of my brokerages. And so Texcel Real Estate, online in any social media, on Instagram or Facebook. And then I also do a YouTube show with my co-host who does notes. We both invest, but she's more of a note investor. And we do Real Estate Divas.
Okay. And how do you spell Texcel?
Texcel.
Okay. Awesome. All right. Well, I want to thank you for taking the time again. And guys, we'll be back next week with another episode of the Agent Investor Podcast. Thank you.
Thank you.